Okay. Hello, hello. Hi, I'm Kate. I like to explain things. I'm so excited. Can we hear me though? Can we hear me? I need someone to answer. In the meantime, oh, I need to not be. How are we all doing? Yay! Okay, so I don't know what. Oh, I should probably be closer. I don't know what we all have heard about what was going on with Jools Lebron. Jools Lebron is a trans woman who got famous for her catchphrase, very demure, very mindful. I'm not like you other girls. She is not wearing black lipstick to work because she's very demure and very mindful. But anyway, she has had a hard road to hoe recently because she had wow, no, I was trying to move that out of my way and I simply made it more prominent. She got into trouble with addiction as part of her rise to fame, which is not an uncommon thing, obviously, when you are suddenly like catapulted into the stratosphere. And last week, she got, I would say, unfairly dogpiled on because she asked her followers last week. Anyway, she asked her followers to help fund a GoFundMe, which is normal. People do that. The take that I kind of appreciate the most on this is from Alayami Alurin. She's another YouTuber, and she says that like as a creator, your job is to create, so you don't need to like grab a whole bunch of like asking your followers for money is kind of wild. You could just make more things, but Jules is doing that. She's live streaming now, but she was an influencer before, and Alayami herself was saying that well, like obviously she doesn't judge Jules, but like an but like an influencer has a different kind of money stream, right? So you need to be viewed as bankable. And I don't know if anyone has noticed, but trans people being trans influencers have not been viewed as bankable. So it's not exactly fair to like assume that you should just use your money appropriately. But like that's my that's my take. That's my take outside of my actual take, which is that when people are in pain, the kind of pain that Jools Lebron is describing of like having um like holes in her jaw, her teeth are moving around all the time. She's in constant pain. She says that she can't drink water without being in pain. That kind of constant pain, specifically when it comes to your teeth, is enough to drive people crazy. Now, I personally don't have as much experience with chronic pain myself. Fortunately, I do, however, have experience with chronic lack of sleep. Like, I wouldn't say insomnia has been my problem recently. It's more along the lines of like I wake up. Well, that's I've been woken up every few hours. It's clearly an environmental thing. Don't worry about it. But when I was a teenager, it was simply like I just couldn't get enough sleep because I had to wake up too early to be able to go to school and all that sort of stuff. Like yeah, common stuff that we all deal with. But that is related in my mind, because if you can't sleep, you can't, like, you just go crazy. You start making weird decisions. Like, I lost my keys for 5 hours, like, because I genuinely couldn't remember where I had been the night before. And I was, like, just, I went outside, I from my car, where I had my keys. I went to sit somewhere else in my yard. I dropped my keys, forgot that I dropped my keys, walked inside, and hey presto, the next morning I couldn't figure out where, I couldn't go anywhere because I didn't have my keys. There are just things that, like, little things that truly, like, remind you that this is the sort of thing that is torture. It is simply torture. We do these things to torture people. Like, we deprive them of sleep. We give them small amounts of chronic pain, to that I won't describe because, you know, censorship. When we want people to go crazy, and so we just don't make good decisions with ourselves. Because, hi, I'm Kate. I'm a social psychologist. I'm a psychologist. I do like to explain things. I don't do science communication, though, as much as I am a lot more passionate about media literacy. And this is where I would say the media literacy piece comes in, because the way you understand media is influenced by what your background is. So, like, my background as a psychologist is that I know how compromised someone's decision making is. So, yes, was Jools Lebron probably not in the best state of mind to be making important financial decisions while she was using? Probably not. Luckily, I do know, because that's the part of her story I've followed more personally, that she bought her family a house, like an apartment complex. So, like, she lives with her family in an apartment complex. Like, that's not a bad thing to be doing with your money. So actually, she's been making kind of justifiable decisions. It's just that also she needs $40,000 right now to fix her teeth because she's going crazy. Because, yeah, you would go crazy if you were in constant pain, especially this close to your brain, because, like, physiologically, like, basic, I think people who've taken high school psychology probably did the same thing I did in high school when we're learning about pain and, like, and the nervous system, that the further, like, that you, like, if you get in a circle and you send a like, you squeeze each other's hands, so you start on one side and you squeeze, and then when you feel your hand squeeze, you squeeze the next person. And when you do that with your hands, it takes you a shorter amount of time than if you grab people. You grab people when you feel you hold each other's ankles and you squeeze each other's ankles. It takes less time. I played soccer as a kid, so, and since I'm lanky, I had a lot of coaches being like, "Yeah, Kate, you can try. You're just not going to be as coordinated as the other kids who are shorter." And it's like, yeah, it's true. I'm just not going to be. It takes longer for the sensory input, like the thing, like, literally it's a physical process. Getting the decision to do something from my brain to my foot, it genuinely just takes longer, and so you have to train harder to make it go faster, and that's one of the reasons why NBA players are freaks of nature. But anyway, all that to say, when you have tooth pain, I mean, honestly, like, when you, like, I don't know if anybody's had, like, a cracked tooth that, like, might be related to, like, mighty abscessing, but truly that's a dangerous thing that your medical insurance has to take care of, because you can poison your brain. And an infection too close to your brain means it's a brain infection. And, you know, we can't really survive those. So we really need to address things really quickly in that arena, because it's genuinely dangerous to let those things go. Which is why, you know, it's just so important to go to the dentist and make sure all your ducks are in a row with your teeth. Because, yeah, like, even if it's just, like, normal pain and it's not an abscess, it's not, like, endangering your health, it just is pain. Like, how it's you're not, what's the distance? What's the distance between here and like your brain starts, okay, because this will be important for later. Your brain starts in your brain stem, which is on your neck, which is how far away? Yeah, it's you're talking about like sometimes a few inches, sometimes less. So it just is a constant. I can't imagine the kind of constant pain that you are dealing with when you have chronic tooth pain. Which is why, I mean, like, people genuinely, it's the choice between losing your teeth completely is the better option sometimes. That's how people, like, you know, you have false teeth and like rows of false teeth, because it is truly, you cannot have, but like somebody in Jools Lebron's position can't go like, she can't go 3 months without her teeth. Like, she does it, so like the kind of work she probably needs done, like the cost of that, it all kind of makes sense, right? So yes, that is my, and I say this is media literacy because you need to hold on to the things that you know to be true outside of media narratives. So outside of a dog pile of somebody saying, yeah, it's kind of tacky for somebody who has earned like maybe $100,000 in her lifetime over the course of 1 year, it's kind of tacky for her to ask for a GoFundMe when we're all struggling. My answer to that, of course, is always that you don't have to give. It's not you don't have to. Like, this is not these. No one's asking you to. No one's holding you at the end of a rope saying we're only gonna grab you. We're only gonna take you up if you donate to Jools Lebron's GoFundMe for her teeth. And the idea that people have no patience for this when they have patience for literally like, I'm a sucker for mutual aid in the algorithm. Like, I am such a sucker because I want to boost them. I can't give them anything. So I give them my attention instead to boost them in the algorithm, but I had to like choose to stop doing that. I have to choose to avoid mutual aid because it just is too depressing. Like, a friend of mine likes to say that GoFundMe is the nation's #1 provider of medical care, and I think everyone I've like listened to on this topic has said like how outrageous that is and how that's the problem. Jools Lebron is not the problem. Yes, and I need people to when we're talking about media literacy, we need all of that, right? We need people to be able to like see through the dog pile and be like, okay, well, why are we dogpiling a trans woman for saying she can't necessarily get a job that will, on like the first week of her job, is going to approve the kind of sick leave that it takes, not only like get on their insurance. What was the last time people, sorry, when was the last time people got new insurance through an employer? It doesn't kick in. Like, if you're in constant pain now, and you need your teeth now, yeah, she's right. Getting a new job isn't the answer to your problems, even if it was able to cover $40,000 of tooth reconstruction immediately. Like, what are you talking about anyway? Like, there needs to be all these sorts of angles. That is how media literacy works. And one of the angles that we can use is the, like, systemic, like, no, you can't, why are we criticizing Jools Lebron when we should be criticizing the members of Congress that aren't getting on board for Medicare for all? And then there's the more individual systemic problem of like, why are we jumping up and down why do we feel so comfortable jumping up and down on a trans woman's back, an Afro-Latina trans woman's back? Like, why is that? Is it because, in my opinion, we are so ready to discount the pain of somebody in her position that we truly just, like, our brains turn off? And this is where understanding that your brain, when you're like, it doesn't matter if like it's something that you wouldn't do. you aren't in chronic pain. You maybe are, and you might be living with it in a different way than Jools Lebron is, because that's of course something we'll get to shortly when we start talking about the paper I have. But yeah, you're not in chronic pain of this nature. You don't understand, like, the decision making is genuinely actually different than when you are dealing with, you're just like living your life. Yeah, a lot of people opened their thing with, like, yeah, I have tooth pain, and it is scary, and it's like, okay, but, like, is it chronic? Has it been something you've been dealing with for months and it's not gonna get better? Like, anyway, constant pain is different than other kinds of pain. Not all pain is created equal. We're gonna cover this. One second, I have to go back to we're gonna cover this study, Choosing Well, a narrative review on chronic pain and decision making. So this is a kind of review paper that academics do when they want to bring themes out, but they don't necessarily want to, like, crunch the numbers, because sometimes there aren't really comparable numbers to crunch, and that's a different type of analysis. And that would be, like, more of a gold star version of this. But anyway, I just realized I haven't asked anybody if they have any questions at all. Does anybody have any questions? I'll wait for a little bit. I want to make sure that everybody has time to ask questions before I transition to the next thing. Okay. I can't remember how long I have to wait. That's ridiculous. Oh, right. Well, I see the stream now. Okay. Well, definitely had time to ask the question. Okay. All right. So we are looking at Horta, Wright, Lytol, and Fillingham. Ironic. Fillingham. Okay. I didn't make that connection until now. The abstract says, chronic pain is one of the most prevalent and costly health conditions in the United States. Previous work has demonstrated that chronic pain impacts cognition and behavior. So cognition would be your thoughts, like how you think, and behavior being like what you do. However, the impact of chronic pain on daily decisions is less well known. This narrative review identified and synthesized findings from a literature search that yielded 18 peer-reviewed experimental cross-sectional design studies and on the effects of chronic pain and different decision-making outcomes. According to the literature, the effects of chronic pain on decision-making are evidenced by 1. Reduced decision performance, 2. Increased risk-taking and daily discounting, and 3. Altered sensitivity to outcomes, 4. Reduced cognitive flexibility and learning. Sorry, I felt the sneeze coming on for a little bit, and I just need to... Excuse me! I have, like, one of those foghorn sneezes that is truly, like... I think one time in 6th grade, my teacher was like, come on, Kate, you could have helped. Does it have to be that loud? But anyway, chronic pain effects on decision making also vary by individual factors such as sex, gender, age, and affective and social factors. So affective is like how you feel, and social factors being things like how well connected you are to other people, and like social decision making is something that we are. Oh, thank you. Thank you. I've been blessed. Yes. social decision making would be something that we're looking at here, right? So Jools Lebron made kind of a normal decision for her. She posted a video about like something that YouTube, like that influencers and content creators, hopefully not content creators as much, because I do kind of agree with Maya Lurin about like content creators, you should just do like create that video, my dear, like sell out just a tiny little bit for a little bit so that you can get the money to fix whatever needs to get fixed. But like influencers, yeah, like they do this is a thing that influencers do. So like she posted like normal decision making, or or not normal decision making on chronic pain, kind of a like maybe potentially discounting her options, discounting like, oh, people are like, it doesn't matter how people are going to react, I just have to do this. Guided by these findings, current limitations and future directions in the field are discussed. Okay. The introduction. So this is the section where they review past literature, and do the general influences of what's going on here. Whether it's making a purchase, volunteering, screening for cancer, or interacting with others, our daily decisions contribute to our overall health and well-being. The ability to choose well can be impacted by a myriad of reasons relating to one's individual characteristics, experiences, and age, including age, impulsive traits, and exposure to stress, to name a few. Previous work has also linked certain health conditions to impairments in decision-making, such as substance use disorders. Yes, when you are an active when you are seeking out substances because you feel like you're dying, and potentially, depending on what your substance is, you could be, your decision-making changes. And brain damage, which would then also be related to substances depending on what's going on. Experience of pain is one major yet understudied factor that can influence decision making. For example, acute pain induced in healthy humans, so acute meaning like I just punched you in the thigh, like that's acute pain, versus I promise this is not trauma dumping. You see at me, I'm fine. It was a benign tumor, but it was a benign tumor in my hip. That was chronic pain. I was 7. It was fine. You see me, I'm fine. Healthy humans, along with related factors such as the threat of pain, have been associated with riskier decision-making in the laboratory. So, obviously, when you are threatening people with pain, you probably are not going to get ethical approval for a study that is in the wild. You're probably only going to get ethical approval for a very specific set of procedures that, like, this is how it's controlled. This is how we're going to talk to people after it, and to be like, say, hey, this, and also disclose ahead of time all sorts of stuff. There's a lot of ethical considerations to do with this kind of research because it's like pain, right? We can't just, for the love of the game, cause people pain for research purposes. That's not acceptable. Understanding the role of chronic pain in decision-making is critical, given the chronic pain affects more than 20% of the population, and it incurs enormous societal costs. I'm sure that's $1 billion. Yes! $500 billion annually. That's T. That's trillion with a T. $500 billion annual in the U.S. and diminishes the quality of life and outcomes across the lifespan. Speaking of systemic criticisms, geez, when managing pain is worth $500 billion annually, do you think there's maybe some financial disincentives to prevent people from getting into chronic pain in the first place? Maybe that's how it is. Anyway, chronic pain adversely impacts cognition, that's thinking, and the brain, which can affect decisions and relevant to navigating everyday life, including coping with and seeking relief from pain. again. So if you are in so much distress, and again, and withdrawal is painful, you can choose between seeking something that will relieve your pain with less damaging health consequences, or relieve the pain that you know. See, this is why people probably have studied more in depth the substance use disorders with this sort of decision making process, because it's pretty one-to-one, right? You're gonna make poorer choices when your addiction is telling you to do something, versus like here's the front part of your brain is typically considered like the decision making process. We'll get there, don't worry. Has the potential to influence not only everyday decisions, but also more consequential and emotionally charged decisions, such as whether to undergo and adhere to certain medical treatments or plan advanced care. Although the impacts of chronic pain on cognitive functioning and the brain are discussed elsewhere, less attention has been devoted to the effects on decision-making in particular. This narrative review synthesized current evidence to identify the path by which chronic pain may possibly alter decision making. So that's what they're talking about in terms of. Oh, I just saved instead of it. That's what they're talking about instead of. They're saying we're looking at how this. Okay, sorry. This is the stuff I care less about as a social psychologist, but it is important. Trying to figure out how the path they're talking about, identify the paths by which chronic pain may alter decision making, is like paths in the brain. I talked about it earlier. This idea that there is it's like it's a chemical transfer between synapses and neurons, but it's a physical thing, right? So the I'm like talking to the microphone instead of the camera. That's so funny. And also this makes no sense. A synapse and a neuron are not actually touching. There's a space between, and that's where all the chemicals hang out. When you have an SSRI, for example, a serotonin reuptake something, they're saying like the thought process is that serotonin. Moving on. The thought process is that we're gonna let the message needs to come from this neuron, and instead of letting that message be absorbed into the other neuron, we're gonna block it, and that's how SSRIs works. And yes, so there's like an actual physical path with chemicals going on. This is a really complicated field, guys, that we don't know anything about. We are truly at the infant stages of understanding how the brain works, and so this is kind of like bare bones. Selective serotonin, SS. There we go. I'm just glad I got serotonin correct. The method, okay, so the methodology is described below. We actually don't care about the methodology because we are not doing science education. We are doing media literacy. So we just want the findings. We don't care necessarily at this moment in time about how they found the research. Mostly because it's like, yeah, they looked at Google Scholar, I'm sure, and they looked in the databases, and they came up with these things, and they all matched their criteria. That's essentially what happened. I really can't help it. I have to explain things. Current limitations and future directions. Blah, 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 blah. Chronic pain can alter cognitive functions that support decision making. Again, who's surprised? Water is wet. Chronic pain can alter various interrelated cognitive, again thinking, functions critical for decision making, including but not limited to attention. So if a little part of your brain is always dealing with the fact that your tooth is rotting away from the inside, Are you really going to have the same amount of attention to pay to things? Processing speed. So this would be different. This is the idea that would be different. It's that this cost that's associated with managing the pain in your brain makes your thinking process slower. Memory. Important thing about memory is that if you do not, if you're not focusing and reinforcing the memory, because again, something else is going on in the background, you're not going to remember as much. This is its own thing. Reward processing. So that would be the happy little, I clicked on a reward. I clicked on my notifications, and I addressed the notifications. Task switching. So that's what we as psychologists would consider multitasking. You're not actually doing the same thing at one time. You are shifting your attention from one thing to another effectively or ineffectively. So people who are good at multitasking are really good at the short shifts in attention and shifts between tasks. And people who are bad at multitasking because they forget one of the tasks they just forget to do because they, whatever reason, excuse me, that you could give, that is task switching, not multitasking. It's a whole thing. Emotion processing, e.g., difficulties in emotion regulation and increased negative emotional states. Go figure. When you are in pain, you're upset. Cognitive changes in people with chronic pain may also include reduced neuropsychological performance and impaired learning. So all these citations here mean that they go to different studies, and then this right here suggesting that impaired learning was found in 3 studies. Go figure. I had a psych professor, who kind of got annoyed with the concept of styles of learning, because ultimately what learning is successfully remembering something. So the process of memory, getting memories into your brain and recalling memories, is the same in all human beings probably. But the reinforcement and how much you remember, how much you're processing in the first place, all of that is different, and that's where things come together. So the actual recall is what I would consider learning anyway. So memory and learning are very, very interrelated concepts for psychologists. Individuals with chronic pain can experience increased executive dysfunction. Oh, our friend executive dysfunction. This is where I was like, oh, I'm gonna be able to talk about the model of the brain. The fist is a model of the brain. Executive dysfunction would be here in the I'm gonna read it soon. In the thinky party of the brain, the part of the brain that chooses where to direct your attention. That's executive. So think the president is the executive and the head of the executive branch of the government. Your governor is also another executive. They execute things. It's what helps you execute the plans that you make. So you make a plan and then you do it. That's using executive function. Executive dysfunction, of course, would then be the kind of an example of this is what I was just talking about, task switching, not being able to switch between tasks because you forget one task, or you can only really focus on one thing. This is why hyperfocus is a symptom of developmental disabilities or developmental differences with people who it's all interrelated. It's executive dysfunction, including disrupted attention. So I was paying attention, and then there was a wave of pain in my tooth that was already hurting, so that sucks. Planning and problem solving associated with day-to-day activities. And again, this is coming from 3 different studies. These impairments have far-reaching impacts on goal-oriented cognitive processes. So yeah, if you can't So goal-oriented cognitive processes. So it's not just planning, right? It would be being able to make these small steps that come with making the plan. So if you get overwhelmed really easily at the thought of a big plan, it might be because you need a little bit of help. Your executive functioning needs a little bit of help breaking that overall goal into the smaller goals that you can then complete in the order that they need to be completed. Again, this is why it's jargony language, but like it's saying a specific thing, such as the ability to focus attention, assess information, and execute plans. Chronic pain is also associated with other cognitive challenges, such as impairment to set shifting and response inhibition. Baker and colleagues found that executive dysfunction and chronic pain was prominent across working memory and emotional control processes. So working memory is another really important thing that so your long-term memory is like, I remember doing this, your first memories from childhood are part of your long-term memory, versus your working memory is remembering where you set your phone down, which I'm very bad at. I'm very bad at remembering where I set my phone down, unless it's where I normally put it, which would be a long-term memory thing, right? So normally I put it within reach, and so I normally just pick up my phone as I'm moving to the next place, and that would be like the long-term memory versus the working memory. And emotional control is kind of self-explanatory. If you are in pain, can you regulate your emotions? Can you? Yes, but it's much harder. Moderating factors, so these are factors that make things much worse or easier, such as negative emotional state. So like if you're sad and you're in pain, being sad is going to make you think about it's going to make the feeling of pain worse. It's going to make you think about the pain more, or etc. etc. Being sad makes the pain worse. We're also significant predictors of executive dysfunction. So not only does the sadness make the pain worse in loose terms, but the sadness also is not helping your executive dysfunction. Woohoo! Can we see how it is going to be hard for me as a psychologist to feel like somebody who is in chronic pain, who made a bad, like maybe a kind of questionable decision, should be dogpiled on for that questionable decision? No! I'm not going to be on that, and I don't think anybody who knows this would be interested in dogpiling either, which is the media literacy part of this. That like as a consumer of media, that's not fair, because you also have the background knowledge to say that that's not, like, she's not making good choices. Sure, that's self-evident. She's in pain. Additionally, Attridge and colleagues demonstrated that the recurrent pain disrupted, so recurrent meaning what it means in real life, I imagine. So it's the pain that like comes back. Disrupted instead of like a chronic pain that is more like back pain. Well, back pain can be recurrent too. Maybe I would say arthritis. I think I feel like arthritis or aches, like age aches and pains, are pretty much like consistent. Other people describe it as pretty consistent versus like again, Elia Lauren, just because she shared it in her video and I've been talking about her, she has an impacted wisdom tooth that is like truly perpendicular to her other tooth, and so she can't, it's inoperable. And again, I'm talking to the microphone instead of the camera, and so she just has described that like she sometimes gets waves of pain every once in a while, and it's true, and it's really hard on her because of just the like she just has to knuckle through it until the pain goes away. But yeah, wouldn't that disrupt your basic attention and potentially leading to poor decisions in an ecological. So ecological means that, like, you took these people shopping, you took some people with recurrent pain shopping, and you took people who didn't have that pain shopping, and you compared their decision making while they were shopping. And the people who were in pain had demonstrated poorer decision making processes. And, like, poor being relative is important here, because it could be that they went to the first, like, they went to the closest to them product instead of looking for the cheapest or the best product or whatever. Like, they spent less time deliberating over what was going on, like the decisions they were making. They just, like, grabbed for the nearest thing, which is not ideal decision making, right? We want to be more deliberative in our decisions. This finding illustrates how cognitive disruptions, so again, disruptions in the way you think, can impact day-to-day decision-making in individuals with chronic pain, including the ability to evaluate potential outcomes thoroughly. So, why does this relate to Jools Lebron? If you are in chronic pain and you are just going about your business, doing things that normal things that you've seen people do basically your whole life now, because, again, GoFundMe is the number one provider of medical help in this country, then maybe, just maybe, you won't remember that you've said on national television you got paid $40,000 for a video. Why are you not just, actually, I think more? Anyway, why don't you just have that video money that you made and use it to pay? Because you're not thinking about that, because that happened years ago and the pain is happening right now. Though some have observed pain can act as a competing influence on cognition and related task performance. That's what I've mostly been describing, that, like, that this pain is like, and either ignoring the pain or, like, embracing the pain is just, like, this consistent cost to you. That's a way to, like, you're competing for your attention. Like, your attention is kind of a limited thing. Like, you can't really, you can work on it, but, like, mostly it's your attention, which is actually honestly pretty good. I am not an attention researcher, but I do believe the attention researchers that I've heard interviewed, who said that attention spans aren't getting worse, except everybody feels that way, but also people have always felt that way, because what you want is to have better attention, but that doesn't mean you had good attention to start with. Anyway, so attention is somewhat of a limited resource, and, like I said, there's no such thing as multitasking. You're just actually shifting between tasks. And so I have been describing pain as something that is competing with other things for your focus, and that it uses to do well on a task, so related task performance. Others report mixed evidence or small effects for executive dysfunction in people with chronic pain. So, turns out we need more than one study to be able to know these things for sure, though there are patterns. These inconsistent findings on executive dysfunction may reflect that specific cognitive impairments associated with chronic pain may be too subtle to be detected by standardized neuropsychological assessments. And this is where I remind you what I said at the very beginning, is that we know almost nothing about the brain. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze again. Okay. We almost know nothing about the brain, and this is, we know something or other, and definitely experts know more than us, because I'm not an expert. I just know how to read these things. So, we are suggesting that it's important that there is room to develop. Thank you again. There's room to develop these things further. See also, whatever 37 is, for no effect of chronic pain on logical reasoning. Logical reasoning being something is like, this happens, so then this happens, so then this happens, which is it would be in the part of the brain located in the executive functioning part of the brain, but it's an important finding because when people make logic is, I think, I don't want to digress too much, but like a lot of people who are like mediumly good at logic put a lot of stock by it. It's kind of like the Dunning-Kruger effect that thought that like if you're really good at something, you know how bad you are. When you're bad at something, you know how bad you are. But like if you're a medium at it, you're like, no, I know everything there is to know about this. When you really don't. You simply do not. And so logical reasoning is something that children can do. That's one of the reasons why people are so annoyed to hang out with teenagers or to argue with teenagers, or especially middle schoolers, because I'm Kate. I used to be somebody who worked in a middle school. When teenagers have a lot of logic, they just don't have a lot of life experience. So when they make arguments, there are flaws in their reasoning, not because the reasoning itself is flawed, but because they don't have enough background knowledge from their life experience or from having argued before to like think through everything. So like they're like, but like this is logical, and you're like, but it's not the whole picture. And that's like over and over again why it's so frustrating. That is again, apparently there was a finding where you're just as logical. It's just that like you're taking longer to make decisions, and you're not thinking through all the decision. You're not thinking through everything, and also like little things you might forget along the way, which makes your decision not as strong. The relationship between pain and cognition is complex, and some theorize that pain and cognition are reciprocally linked. That means that like reciprocal means both of them feeding on each other. Further, investigations onto the effect of chronic pain on cognition are currently limited by the lack of consideration of critical moderators. Again, moderator would be like things that make it much more hard, such as sleep quality. Sorry, that was probably very loud. My bad. Pain duration and intensity, and medication use. So if you are like me and forget that or get lazy and don't go grab your acetaminophen or ibuprofen when you're like, oh, I'm in pain, I've been clenching my jaw while I sleep because I have that poor quality of sleep. Maybe I should take ibuprofen. Nah. That is an example of a poor decision. Especially because, anyway, I've definitely seen, go take ibuprofen, it should make you feel better. And also, it potentially has the effect of helping you heal faster because you aren't in pain, because you aren't clenching as much, because you're not in as much pain. And it's a whole thing. I would not say the same for all types of pain medication, obviously. Use as your doctor advises. For example, certain analgesic medications used for pain management have been linked to cognitive impairment. What kind of analgesic medications are bad for your brain and people with chronic pain? But like that's not just it's not just like oxy and stuff. Other stuff can too, because it's not everything's an opioid, luckily for us all. Cognitive status before onset of pain may also play a role of exacerbating chronic pain-related disability and distress, and is critical to consider when examining decision-making outcomes of specific groups of people with chronic pain, such as older adults with mild or more advanced cognitive impairment. So that would be like somebody with anyway, somebody with dementia was going to process pain differently than somebody without dementia, I would imagine, is what they're kind of referencing. And this is the methodology of the literature search. We're not going to read it. Overview of findings. First, it is essential to note that conclusions drawn from these studies are limited, partially due to the breadth of chronic pain conditions. Like, they're going to talk about fibromyalgia in this a lot, chronic back pain, which is hard to diagnose. All chronic pain is hard to diagnose, and hard being relative, of course, because of the patient's side of things. Doctors are sometimes really bad at their jobs. But yes, and that's like a whole, yes, I have chronic pain in my hip from sleeping weird and doing just weird, like, or like I have chronic pain in my shoulder from carrying. I've moved many times by like literally carrying all my belongings in bags in my hands, sometimes varying long distances, and so I have injured myself doing that, and so therefore I have chronic pain. I'm kind of feeling it right now. It comes up when I'm stressed. That is not the same as fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia is it's a totally different thing. It has more to do with your nervous system than an injury. That is where some studies exclusively examine decision-making outcomes for a specific chronic pain condition, chronic back pain, chronic migraine, fibromyalgia. Other studies include mixed etiology of chronic pain conditions. So, like, I couldn't be in the chronic migraine study because I have only had one migraine in my entire life, so I've had an acute migraine. So I am a migraine haver, it's just like one time that I've had a migraine. So, but I could be in the mixed etiology condition because I have chronic pain. And a moth. Fun for us all. Okay. Additionally, the reviewed studies primarily focus on decision-making outcomes related to non-social gambling. So that would be the way they evaluate the decision-making process is through a gambling game. I've highlighted it down here. The Iowa gambling task and delay discounting. So like waiting to make your decision. I imagine that's what they're talking about here. Waiting to make your decision until you've gotten enough information to make a good one. For example, 8 reviewed studies examined decision-making using the Iowa gambling task or an analog task. Additionally, only 2 studies were conducted in preclinical animal models of chronic pain. So, fun story. This is not a cruelty-free paper article. My bad. I didn't know we were doing that. Well, I kind of did, but I didn't think about how awkward it was going to be until now. And all others were performed in humans. 2 studies did not include a healthy group control. So control, that would mean that it's people, it's not an experiment because you don't have somebody to compare the scores and related things to. I am not interested in the decision-making in experimental settings discussion, because it opens a whole nother can of worms and is also mostly methodological. If anyone would like me to discuss this, speak now or forever hold your peace. I do think that one of the hard things about knowing a little bit too much about psychology is being able to be like, yeah, I don't think that measures the thing you think you're measuring, especially when it's non-psychologists doing research that I would be like, yeah, hey, that's psychology, and you didn't measure what you think you're measuring because you're, for example, your gambling is not the only way to measure it's called I'm not gonna be able to say it out loud. Operationalize, there we go, the concept of decision making. It's just maybe the easiest, and it has real world analogs. So like we have real world gambling, but not everybody gambles. So, and not gambling is in fact I would argue, as a non-gambler, as a biased non-gambler, is an example of good decision making. Okay, I think they've held their peace, and we're gonna move on. But yes, so the way you measure these things does matter, because if you're not measuring the thing you think you're measuring, then the finding is a lot less applicable to real life. But we are not in a position as non-subject area experts to really evaluate like the cost benefit analysis there, because if you, like I said earlier about like, no one's gonna actually let you put someone in pain for your psychological study. That's crazy. Don't do that. You can, however, but that does severely restrict the ability to have like interpretable results, not good results, because being manipulated in a study into having pain is not a natural thing that happens to human beings. This is an ethical considerations that I am a lot more interested in than this topic, so I'm going to move on because we need to finish what we're talking about. Okay, thus the state of the field is still nascent, and available studies do not cover all the decision-making domains that are relevant. The current limitations with the findings of these studies were synthesized and collectively demonstrate that the chronic pain is associated with 1, reduced decision-making performance, 2, increased risk-taking and delayed discounting, and 3, alter sensitivity to outcomes, and 4, reduced learning and cognitive flexibility. So we will potentially skip past figure 1. Sorry, my bad. Please, if you are interested in reading that, read that, and then ask any question you want in any comment section. I will find it and see it and answer it. Lower decision performance compared to healthy controls. One consistent behavioral indicator of impaired decision-making across studies was lower decision-making performance. Decision performance can be objectively measured by tabulating, like doing math, outcomes of decision-making tasks such as net scores, wins versus losses, and preservation errors. I think preservation errors is like you remember something incorrectly. Generally, individuals with chronic pain have of mixed etiology, so that's my example of me being in the same group as people with chronic migraine, perform worse on decision-making tasks compared to healthy controls. These studies report poor performance across multiple pain conditions, including fibromyalgia, chronic back pain, complex regional pain syndrome, chronic migraines. Behavioral differences in decision-making performances may be further magnified between specific pain conditions. For one example, people with CRPS performed worse than those with chronic back pain in the gambling task. Although CRPS and chronic back pain involve localized pain in specific body areas, these conditions differ in their manifestations, meaning pain onset, intensity, and duration, disability, and treatment. So I imagine people with back pain are taking medication. CRPS might have to have specialized medication, which you may not have access to, depending on what's going on. For example, this is again, routinely receive sympathetic blocks to temporarily relieve pain from nerve damage, while chronic back pain can be conservatively treated through over-the-counter anti-inflammatory pain relievers and physical exercise. So, I would also, as somebody with something that's arguably chronic back pain, although it's not the same and I wouldn't get diagnosed with it probably, going to a massage therapist is very, very helpful. Thus, the behavioral differences observed between pain conditions could possibly be attributed to underlying factors unique to these populations. In this example, pain severity and how chronic it is were investigating factors that did not explain behavioral differences between groups. Further investigation is needed to characterize underlying differences in decision-making between pain conditions, including other pain-related factors such as emotional reactivity to pain. catastrophizing, and fear. So if you are in pain and you are perhaps have been in pain for many months, and you are just had the deal that you made with somebody to address all that pain fall through, and you're realizing it's going to take you many more months to earn the kind of money that you don't have right now, could you maybe make bad decisions because you are so afraid that you will never ever be able to get the money, so you will then go fund me instead of go make content? Catastrophizing and fear. Because you're somebody who's saying, "Oh, I'm never ever going to be able to make enough money. Therefore, I have to make this decision now." And interference with daily life and well-being. Other studies did not find a significant difference between individuals with chronic pain and healthy controls in decision performance, such as in the form of betting amounts and risk adjustment in the roulette betting task, and chronic pain disorder, or the net scores in the gambling task for fibromyalgia. The lack of group-level behavioral differences in latter studies, so the fibro one, may be due to factors requiring more systemic investigation, including adequate assessment of cognitive function impacted by the chronic pain. So that would, I imagine, based on context, they're saying how I'm tempted to say how smart you are. Adequate assessment, because it says adequate assessment, and we are really bad at measuring how smart you are. It's very famously we're bad at measuring how smart people are. The design and measurement of decision-making tasks and population characteristics. So when you're early in a study in a field, you just don't know what you do not know. Okay, so this is box 2. This is pain in the brain. This is what I've been hoping I maybe could have skipped to. Okay, so functional impacts of chronic pain. In chronic pain patients, impaired cognition, emotion, and decision making. Oh, sorry guys, it's not going to be too small for you. But I would rather have it be... Oh, wow. Sorry for the seasick among us. I'd rather have it be small than again, making you seasick. And decision making. Okay. In chronic pain patients, impaired cognition, emotion, and decision making parallel altered brain function and structure. These alterations occur when the brain regions are both related and unrelated to the processing of pain. So you typically feel pain. This is a fun, not fun, it's really sad, obviously, but when I was in undergrad, I watched a video, we had a video in class about a therapy people were doing for phantom limb syndrome. So people who have had a limb amputated for whatever reason sometimes feel that limb, and a way that people, so like the feeling of that limb will exist in the brain even though it doesn't exist in real life. And so they had people look at a mirror, their other hand mirrored, for example, to help them like connect their brain to something in reality, because we don't know anything about the brain. And that's, again, an overstatement, but come on. Certain regions impacted by chronic pain, such as the prefrontal cortex, that was what I was looking for earlier. The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain that helps you make decision, are involved, and all the executive functioning happens in the prefrontal cortex. Not all of it, but that's complicated. Involve sensory and affective components of brain processing, as well as critical cognitive processes necessary for decision making and learning. Executive function. When you have an executive function disorder, or your executive function is disordered, you are almost, and you can be diagnosed with a specific disability, you are guaranteed an individual education plan or an IEP that puts you automatically, you are automatically allowed to get special education services because of your disability, and you should seek that because you should be getting the services that you deserve. If you would like more context for that, I can give it to you at a later date. More specific, or please ask a question. I'm haunted by a student who had what's called an automatic qualification. He had a diagnosis that meant that he was automatically qualified for an individual education plan, an IEP, automatically qualified for services, and didn't have it. So, anyway, we got it turned around. It was fine. Specifically, the medial prefrontal cortex, which plays a prominent role in processing the emotional, motivational, and cognitive thinking components of pain, is shown to have increased activation response to spontaneous and sustained pain in patients with chronic back pain. So, one of the reasons why I get, as a social psychologist, frustrated with people who are like so up in arms about like the brain is that they have a pretty picture that is associated with the chronic pain, but because of the methodological reasons, like you can't just cause someone back pain and you can't just turn back pain on and off, we don't know. This is associated. We don't know this for sure. It's a standard. It's correlation does not imply causation. It's just pretty pictures that they are able to put on to be able to print in a journal article. If you had asked the person to say that about these things, if they had filled out an inventory, they probably could do the same sort of thing. It's just we're in the early stages. I just like to make sure that everybody has a kind of a narrow focus on what this actually means, because the pretty pictures do tend to confuse people and make them think that we should take this more serious than other types of evidence, and you should not. This should just be part of the evidence that you include to help you understand what's going on, which is why the authors of the study have this in box 2 and not in the main body of the article, in my opinion. I suspect. Increased activation in the medial prefrontal cortex is also a potential indicator of disrupted functioning within the default mode network, which is the only network of the brain that I'm interested in personally as a researcher, because it's the thing that goes on in the background among chronic brain patients. So a default mode network is typically associated with sleep. It's the thing that helps you. It's what's going on in the background, helping you process things, helping you make like your non-conscious decisions, which is not really how it goes. But like, I'm speaking very casually. I'm not doing science education. I told you, I'm not doing science education. We're doing media literacy, which I guess means we should scoot on down. This disruption in default mode network activity has been suggested as a potential mechanism for cognitive and behavioral impairments in observed chronic pain. Again, like chronic pain highly associated with sleep disruption, all that sort of stuff. The nucleus accumbens, another brain region impacted by chronic pain, is associated with reward processing, demonstrating this functional connectivity in the nucleus accumbens with prefrontal regions of the brain, prefrontal meaning decision making, of the brain at rest was reduced in chronic back patients and later corresponded to a greater degree of impulsivity during monetary decision making compared to healthy controls. I'm starting to like not process the words I'm saying out loud, so we're gonna skip kind of quickly through here, except I saw the amygdala. That's, if you have ever seen this shape referring with your fist referring to a brain before, it's probably because you have had the experience of that you've learned the flipping your lid thing. This part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, that helps you make good decisions, helps you decide what you're feeling, helps you put names to your feelings, helps you decide not to hit people because it's going to be bad if you hit people. Because it's helping you think ahead. When this part gets overwhelmed, pop goes the amygdala, and you start making decisions that are not as thought out. The other thing is that total cortical gray matter volume, that's just... So, like, this is a holdover. We know gray matter, and, like, I don't know very much about gray matter because, again, I don't care about the brain structure as much as I care about what it is going on in real life. But, like, gray matter is important. When I was reading this at first time, I was like, okay, what do I really remember about why gray matter is important? And I was, like, somehow connecting it to what we now talk about as smooth brain on the internet. You want as many folds in your brain because that increases the surface area of your brain, which makes it means that you have a more complicated brain, which makes you have a more complicated life than, for example, a fish. A fish does not have a complicated life trying to understand how the object of their parasocial desire fits into their normal life as a regular human being. That just simply is not something that a fish or a spider need to... Well, I don't think spiders have brains. They don't really... I think they don't. But a fish or... What's the thing that has a brain that's not particular? Well, like a bear. A bear, I'm sure, has a less folded brain than ours because it's really hard to have as folded a brain as ours. But maybe octopuses do because I don't know what's going on in their brains. But that whatever it is, it's for the future octopuses that take over the world, octopode. I'm sure it's better than anything we've got going on. But yeah, so it just is something that, like, you want gray matter. That's a good thing. And so to have less is bad. This table describes the findings from all the studies that they're summarizing. Okay, so the increased risk-taking and delay discounting. I'm not confident I understand what delay discounting is, so we're going to kind of try to skip through here until we find what delay discounting is. Chronic pain has been associated with making riskier choices. For example, people with chronic back pain accepted riskier offers, i.e. larger potential for monetary gain, as well as losses in the gambling task as compared to the healthy controls. Similarly, individuals with fibromyalgia compared to healthy controls preferred selecting from disadvantaged decks in the gambling task, leading to potentially higher immediate gains and future loss. Additionally, certain features of chronic neck pain, that's me, such as greater activity pain, night pain, that's me, neck disability, less so me, were correlated with less careful decision-making style as measured by this Melbourne decision-making scale, which we are not going to read, but I've argued this suggested is very important. Risky decision-making in chronic pain may be attributed to factors such as brain changes in reward and pain processing, as well as greater emotional distress related to their pain experience, which may impair cognition and learning. What do we mean by learning? So I always joke. I was so happy. I want to be very clear. When I was saying smooth-brained species of animals are stupid, I am also referring to myself when I'm learning how to play a game. I cannot possibly be asked to learn how to play a game all in one go without actually playing the game because my brain doesn't stick. I just don't care. And I'm not invested. I'm not learning it. My smooth brain approach is just start playing the game, and that means that I'll make poorer decisions it took me a long time, my friends, to get good at the kind of gambling game Balatro. I've played it on stream before, but yeah. And I'm willing to play it again if people show an interest. But because yes, I make bad decisions for a long time, and it took me a long time to win. Because I just I just couldn't onboard all the rules. So it's not that you're bad, but I'm like a PhD student. I have a master's degree, and more importantly, I have a master's degree from a foreign institution, from a completely different education system, which demonstrates my ability to learn, and not even just but the meta learning that it takes to learn how to learn in a new system of learning. Anyway, you get what I'm saying? You get what I'm saying. Learning it's like intelligence. It's not all that it's cracked up to be. It's one word that can mean many things. Risk-taking is also conceptually related to delay discounting, a facet of intertemporal choice. So intertemporal meaning like between time is what my brain is, what my knowledge of. Oh no. Let's find out. Will you not let me? Okay, it won't let me have a dictionary definition. Between temporal meaning time, choice that reflects a preference for smaller and sooner rewards over larger future rewards. Increased delay discounting has been observed in various clinical populations impacted by psychological dysfunction, including depression and addiction. See the whatever study that is number 50 in the end notes. Excuse me. Delay discounting has also been associated with predictor of stress, as a predictor of stress and pain severity in people with chronic pain. Okay, so the classic example that has actually been debunked from psychology is the marshmallow study. It's you give a marshmallow to a child, and you set it in front of them, and then you leave the room and say, if I come back and it's still there, you will get 2 marshmallows, and if you eat it, then you just got the 1 marshmallow. And so it's meant to show the kid being able to have a strong decision-making process to get more reward later. They over-applied that finding to be say, oh yeah, kids who are good at the task actually are more likely to graduate high school or college or something. It's no. This is again the correlational thing we were talking about earlier. Correlation is not causation. What is more highly correlated than the performance one time on that task when you were a child is whether or not your parents went to college or whether your parents graduated from high school. What is more likely to have an influence on your life as a child? This one experience with a marshmallow or your parents? So anyway, but it is the thing that I think of immediately when you're talking about delayed gratification. So delay discounting would be a way to use more specific language than delayed gratification, because it's not the same. And also, sometimes you want something new to have a comparison to something that is misunderstood, so you can have people learn the right thing instead of the wrong thing. Oh man, I'm turning into a pumpkin real fast. Pain anxiety has also mediated the relationship between chronic pain and delayed discounting and pain and monetary loss. So, okay. I forgot to explain what this finding said. So, people who has been associated as a predictor of stress and pain severity in people with chronic pain. So, okay, right here we have, I can't highlight anything from figure 1. Right here we have an example of a relationship picture. To be fair, I also can't remember the actual name of these things. I am simply so we're just gonna go with the one that makes most sense anyway. So chronic pain is associated, has a direct relationship with these identified paths, which, again, each of these things has a direct relationship with decision making. If you have chronic pain, you have reduced decision-making performance, which impacts your decision-making outcome. If you have chronic pain, your increased risk-taking and delayed discounting will impact your decision-making. If you have chronic pain, altered outcome sensitivity will impact your decision-making, and chronic pain directly influences your ability to learn. It reduces your learning and your cognitive flexibility, which impacts your decision-making. All of these things are impacted by individual factors like age, gender, or sex, your feelings, and your social experiences of the world. So your age, so you are more likely to have chronic pain. I learned in this, like the certain types of chronic pain actually peak in your midlife and then go down. Oh geez, why could that happen in capitalism? Why could peaking in your midlife when your life is, anyway, when you're supposed to be making the most money, but maybe you're not, why would that have an association? And then sex and gender, which they don't mention here, but it's called the minority stress theory. It's the idea that people who are minorities, and obviously women are not a minority in number, but they are a minority in power, holders of power. People who are minorities are less healthy because of the stress that just simply being a part of your minority puts on your body, because you have direct, I was called a slur today on the internet. Fun. Somebody who has no slurs that apply to them can't be called a slur on the internet. So my life today, my day it wasn't a big deal at all, but my day was impacted by something that cannot impact a cisgendered man, the same way. And taken together as a cumulative process of all the ways that I have personally been victimized by patriarchy, which, is hard to describe, and this is why people don't do that. We talk about minority stress theory. But yeah, so then also if I was depressed, I am more likely to be anxious. That influences, like, obviously, me being tired has impacted, and that's why I'm starting to feel my chronic pain in my neck, because I'm tired. I've been talking for a long time, so I'm a little bit on the internet, so I'm a little bit more stressed than I am normally. Also, I've had my friends here hanging out, but it's also a social stress to be on the internet, right? You're being perceived, and you don't know who's perceiving you, except kind of I do, but because I'm being perceived by so few people. But yes. Technically, anyone could be perceiving me, which would then impact everything, right? Regarding the chronic pain, which then means that I talk too long about things that don't matter. Or if I'm Jools Lebron, I post a video asking my followers for money during what is an unofficial recession. With inflation making the price of gas hover around $5 a gallon, and if people can't fill up their cars, they're going to lose their job, and then they don't have any money. But Jools Lebron needs $40,000 for her teeth, and she can ask for it, and everybody actually, turns out, then is making bad decisions because we're piling on because of all the things. And do you get where I'm coming from here? that chronic pain influences your decision making, and poor Jools Lebron. She tried to make the decision the best she could, but then ultimately her decision making process was maybe doomed from the beginning. But honestly, luckily for her, she has evidence of other awesome, really awesome choices, like getting sober. And treating her family well. Because you need your social safety net for if you have chronic pain and also are dealing with a substance use disorder. But like, you know, it's all related. It's all related to Jools Lebron. Anyway. Okay, because I'm turning into a pumpkin, I don't care about the reward circuitry in the brain. But it is interesting, isn't it, that it could drive preferences for more risky behavior. Similarly, substance use and medication overuse may have lasting effects on behavior with those with chronic pain and can exacerbate their pain-related experiences relating to risk-taking. Risk-taking means that you are also taking risks with your health, which is another big takeaway from this paper that they'll mention below. The other thing I wanted to make sure that we read is the altered sensitivity to outcomes. In related fashion, sensitivity to choice outcomes, reward, punishment, gains, and losses, is a critical factor in decision making. However, current findings on the extent to which chronic pain alters sensitivity to choice outcomes are mixed. On one hand, some individuals with chronic pain experience increased sensitivity to gains compared to healthy controls. For example, people with fibromyalgia demonstrated a hypersensitivity to rewards marked by impaired learning standards on the gambling task, where monetary gains were immediate but did not during the variant where monetary gains were delayed. So essentially, the people with fibromyalgia were really focused on the reward side of the game, but were less, and when the monetary gains were immediate, but not when they were not, it was harder for them to learn the game when the gains were delayed. I think that's what that means. Similarly, individuals with chronic back pain are willing to accept offers with larger potential monetary gains, even in the face of larger monetary losses. Computational modeling is like the computer is modeling things. It's very, very advanced. It's very advanced. Decision making in process with chronic pain has also shown that behavior in the gambling task is driven by potential gains rather than losses or previous experience compared to healthy controls. Okay, so carrot and the stick. I'm talking to the microphone again. I cannot talk to the microphone. I have to talk to the to the camera. Carrot and the stick. This is saying people were more focused on the carrot and kind of discounted the stick, and also were bad at the delayed. Oh, and they weren't using their previous experience, which is also very interesting. They weren't relying on their previous experience to teach them things. They were more like focused on the reward. So it's like thinking about like somebody who is would seem more impulsive, right? That this like, oh, okay, look at the reward, and kind of discount and not learn so much from the fact that you could lose something, or that you're not necessarily going to get the reward because your previous experience is telling you like the odds aren't very good there on a gambling task. On the other hand, individuals with chronic pain, such as those at higher risk for opioid misuse, demonstrate increased sensitivity to loss rather than to gains. So, chronic pain may also heighten sensitivity to loss, i.e. unfairness, during social economic exchanges, which I'll get to in a bit. So, this is just saying like that there's not one size fits all. This is very early days in these research, but people who are at higher risk for opiate misuse, in my interpretation of this, are also more likely to be depressed, which has like makes the negativity bias that people who are kind of in this kind of position are going to be more focused on the negative than on the positive. And so they're going to, I guess, learn more from the negative side of things. But then the sensitivity to loss is another thing. So like if you're like me and really, one of the reasons why you're bad at games is that you're a sensitive little bean and you don't like losing, but you also know that losing is part of the process. Then you're gonna not try very hard because you're gonna let the process of losing teach you how to do something because you're a sensitive little bean. A smooth-brained, sensitive little bean. So yeah, so like these aren't necessarily like taken in isolation. These things aren't necessarily the worst thing in the world, but like at the same time, it is a good explanation and a good reason to not pile on to someone who is experiencing chronic pain for making a bad choice. Like, okay, she made a bad choice. She's in pain. Yeah, so and that might be something that's going on in the brain. The other thing that's really important I could have zoomed in, my bad. The other thing that's really important to remember when people talk about brain things is that everything that we are perceiving that isn't like stomach related, because apparently there's like the brain stomach connection is really intense and very cool. Like there's neurons in the stomach. I don't even know. It's very cool and I like it because it helps us because curiosity is important and being excited to learn new things is also very important. But everything that you perceive is happening in your brain. So yeah, there's recognizable neural activity happening when you are measured for it. So yeah, all of this that we're discussing, all the behavioral outcomes will have a connection to something going on in the brain. Water is wet. But that's actually really an important distinction that like a lot of people, I helped code data, so I like input the data from a worksheet into the computer for my undergrad psych lab that I was part of. I inputted the data for this idea that people, before they take a introductory psychology class, think that the mind and the brain are completely separate. Overspeaking. Because a lot of people who are taking an introductory psych class and an undergraduate institution in the United States have already taken psychology classes and therefore are not naive participants. That's not the point. The point is, as you learn more about the brain and learn more about psychology, you learn that all these things are related, that your brain and your mind are the same thing. And, you know, my little loop on that is that, like, we perceive our mind and we have a brain, right? So because we can't measure our perception of our mind, I think that's what gets people kind of hooked, off the rails a little bit. Like we know that we're thinking, but we can't see that we're thinking, and we can't see that other people are thinking, even though sometimes it's really cute to watch people think, right? I enjoy because again, thinking is good. We should be thinking more critically. We should be thinking more and challenging ourselves. Challenges are good. Thinking is good. And so watching people think is very cute. But technically, I'm not watching the synapses in their brain, right? But the pretty pictures do. And so that's, again, like, the more you're exposed to those pretty pictures, the theory of this study was the more you are recognizing that your brain is the center of your mind. But like I said, further research turns out like your brain is hugely influenced by your stomach. Go figure. I'm sure like your heart, because it's also an electrical system, like the idea that, but I think it's probably more your stomach, because don't Like, oh, I love to explain things. Your brain uses so much more calories than the rest of your body, like any other organ in the rest of your body, that, yeah, of course, there's this, like, I would imagine, this important link between your stomach and your brain. In terms of evolutionary psychology, there's a whole story about how we started to evolve to walk upright, but that changes the way our pelvis is oriented, and therefore our babies have to be born younger and be outside fetuses. As anybody who's been around an infant knows, they're an outside fetus. They don't do anything, especially compared to like a horse, which, you know, gets up and runs within a few hours of being born. A human baby has to have a smaller brain, but that smaller brain is what helped us evolve into a creature that could hunt enough to support the smaller brain for the outside fetus develops into the bigger brain once you are a toddler and a child, and then into an adulthood. And that has the added benefit of being able to have a mixed diet that can support the brain. And you see how these things go on. And wow, I have completely lost the plot. Where was I going with that? Anyway, our brains and our stomachs are connected. Our minds are influenced maybe by things that are outside our brain, but it still is being processed by our brains. So yeah, anything that happens to do with your perception of, or your decision, anything that you do that you think, happens in the brain and has what's called a neural correlate. And that is why I am not very impressed. I'm not very impressed by arguments that rely on, yeah, well, you can see where it happens in the brain. I assumed it happened in the brain, my guy. That's not impressive to me. Moving on. To reduce learning and cognitive flexibility. So, chronic pain is also associated with challenges in learning during decision-making tasks, as we've discussed already. Some work indicates that people with chronic pain showed reduced to or no learning during decision-making compared to healthy controls. Wow! That's two studies for the no learning. Behaviors such as random choices and switching are associated with learning difficulties in decision-making tasks. So that's, you can tell when somebody's made a random choice because they are, so if you have 4 choices and they are performing at random, that means that they should be getting at least 25% of the choices correct. If they're performing less than random, then that means they're potentially not trying. So like, and if it's a task that they should be good at, they should be getting like 75% of, right? That you should be getting a C on a guess of something that you've just, so say you just completed a task and you read something. Typically developing adults should be able to respond to like questions about what just happened in the text that they just read. If you are making random choices, you could get like 25%. That would be a random evidence for a random choice. 75% would be like you're trying, you're not doing very well, but that's okay. You're performing typically. And then the 100% means, oh, you're very good at this task. Less than random is you're trying hard to be bad. So if you've got a 10% correct, that means you're not trying, and like you probably would get discarded because you weren't trying on this task, and that's bad. However, repetition of tasks may be beneficial for decision-making performance. For example, Aparkian and colleagues found that people with chronic pain performed poorly compared to healthy controls on their first completion of the gambling task. However, when instructed to complete the task for a second time, an improvement of performance was observed. So like the more, that's true of everything, right? So the more you do something, the better you get at it. So that would suggest that, like, yeah, like somebody with chronic pain is going to, if given enough opportunities, get better at the task to the level of people who aren't in chronic pain. And that would just be something to consider in general, right? Is not for our circumstances, but just in general, that like, don't worry. Like, if you have chronic pain, it's gonna be fine. Just like try and give yourself some grace, and you know, think about, like, you might need more chances to learn how to do something, and that's fine, because it's not a big deal. People should be able to give you that amount of time. They should be able to give you grace. That is the argument I'm making here, right? Just because you're experiencing chronic pain, we know that things are going to be more difficult for you. So we're going to give you grace to have a little bit of extra time, or make a really weird, poor decision because, like, no, you got pain. You're in pain. What can we expect from this? Though individuals with chronic pain were able to learn the gambling task over time, they did not perform as well as pain-free controls. So that's literally like the learning process. So, like, you will be able to learn, you're not going to do as well. This is what we call disability, my friends. This is why it's important to not just, like, give the extra time, but, like, also to be like, well, you didn't do as maybe you should get extra all things because you just simply are not going to get to where everybody else is, and that's the difference between equality and equity, right? I think of the famous meme of, like, somebody, like, with height and trying to see over a fence into I think a baseball diamond. The shortest person, when given everybody's given a box, the tallest person who already could see over the fence now sees, like, their entire head is over the fence, but the shortest person is still can't see. Versus equity, which is giving the shortest person a box that allows them to, like, that is tall enough to get them over the fence. And that is what we want when we're talking about disability justice, right? It's not just that we want people who experience chronic pain to be given more chances to perform the same amount, because they aren't going to perform the same amount necessarily. Potentially, because of their chronic pain, because of their disability, they're not going to perform as well. And that means we can't treat everybody equally in that circumstance. We have to say, the person with chronic pain, we're going to give them we're just going to give them more. We're going to get to a section about social experiences of pain, and I think of somebody who I know deals with chronic pain, and my mom will every once in a while be like, why does she not get that she needs to be, like, a friend to me in this moment? And I'm always like, you mean because has pain and you know this? And she's like, oh yes, but yeah, there's every once in a while you just have somebody, you have to give people a break. You just have to, because it's like, what are you gonna do? Be a jerk? What are you gonna do? Be a jerk? Why be a jerk when you could give somebody grace? Previous work has also shown that, compared to healthy controls, novel rather than optimal learning strategies may emerge in decision-making behavior among individuals with chronic pain. So the novel, that's, again, it does remind me about disability justice, because, like, somebody finding a new way to solve a problem doesn't mean that it's the best way to solve a problem, but it doesn't mean that it's a bad way to solve a problem, and it doesn't mean we should, like, hinder them and tell them, like, no, don't solve the problem that way, because it solves the problem. It's just not as optimal as the other, and this is why we send people to education, and this is why we educate people, but that we also, like, aren't freaks about it. I was talking with my friend yesterday who's a teacher about like, the difference between, like, being we were at a roller, like a gay skate, and the employees that I'm sure were being paid minimum wage to make sure everybody was safe and not getting concussed. I was like, oh, I'm so glad that this person's back, because the person that was here last time was much more of a cop about it, and this person's much more of a teacher about it. Which my friend got kind of immediately. Like, that the idea that, like, a teacher is not, ideally, is, like, giving you room to express yourself while also telling you the right way to do things, versus a cop is just, like, saying, no, this is the right way to do things. You have to do it this way. There's just a more punitive thing, and that's again like why it's so important for people who with disabilities to not live in an environment where their faults or their disabilities are being punished by the fact that by society. You shouldn't be punished by society because your teeth stopped working. Because what are you gonna do? Like what? You can't live without teeth. You can't be punished for these things. We should, as a society, be wrapping around Jools Lebron and using this as an opportunity to say, hey, wouldn't it be great if we all had access to dental care and not equitable access to dental care, that the people who need more of it can get more of it, and the people who need less of it don't, we can get some, but it doesn't, it's not the same, and it shouldn't be the same, and therefore we just don't need to, like, I need help with my teeth. No, but you need the same amount of help with your teeth. Do you need $40,000 worth of help for your teeth? Like, these aren't questions we should be shooting out at each other. We shouldn't be sniping each other. We should be helping each other in a more equitable, just world. And now with your knowledge, some background knowledge, it should be a little bit easier for you to stay on the same page. Bringing it back. Oh yeah, individuals with chronic pain tend to exhibit reduced cognitive flexibility, or the ability to adapt to their thinking and behavior in a changing environment, which may stem from avoidance of pain predictive cues and the negative this is a long sentence anyway, negative anticipatory state associated with them. Okay, so are you, I have another friend who has migraines. I have a friend with chronic migraines who has to avoid the triggers. So avoiding the trigger of the migraine itself creates behaviors that might not be ideal, if that makes sense. So in a changing environment, somebody who has, say, like you're driving and suddenly you're leaving, the sun comes out from a cloud. Oh no, okay, no. This is harder. This is a harder one to explain, I guess. Okay, so in a changing environment, you might, if you are trying to avoid pain triggers, be more conservative in the way you go about exploring that new environment. And you might say, no, I can't do this new thing in this new environment because it might cause me pain. There we go. I can't do this new thing in this new environment because it might cause me pain. I don't know if it will cause me pain, and I am avoiding that pain so I'm gonna not do that thing. It's similar to the logic of like people who are vaccine hesitant. They are worried that they're worried that the vaccine might have a negative impact on them, and so they're going to, they don't know if they're going to catch the disease that the vaccine is there to address. So doing the thing might cause them harm. It won't. It's a vaccine. It's safe. But not doing the thing, we don't know if that's going to cause harm. So it's the same thing. It's the avoidance. It's the negative anticipatory state. Like you're going to not do something to avoid the negative consequence that you perceive to be a thing, even though it's not. Get a vaccine. Please vaccinate yourself and people around you. Because of that risk reward structure, you are risking getting sick because you're just assuming you're going to stay healthy. That's a bad assumption. Pain-related avoidance diminishes opportunities to explore and learn from one's environment and can have negative cognitive impacts, including fear and catastrophic thinking. Again, catastrophizing is the idea that nothing's ever going to be okay ever again. I have to make this big decision now, because if I don't make this big decision now, because nothing's ever going to be right again, I can't wait to find out, to see if something better can come along. I have to make this decision now. That would be an example of how catastrophizing influences your decision-making process. Learned avoidance behaviors are difficult to extinguish, which may lead to relying on habitual or less deliberative decisions. So, this is a whole nother thing. And because I am actively pumpkinifying in front of you in this exact moment in time, I am going to just say that when you learn something from pain, it is harder to relearn something over it. I think that's what they're mentioning here. And there was also talking about the animal cruelty study, so we can skip that. Although, anyway. Okay, so this is the part that I read earlier today for the first time, and I do think it's really important to point out that just because you have a demographic doesn't mean that that it's a direct influencer of pain. If we go back to the model here, the direct influencers of pain are along this line here. That chronic pain is a directly influences these things, which then directly influences decision making. Individual factors such as your age, your gender, or your emotional state, and your social abilities indirectly influence your pain, because women are more likely to have chronic pain because of, again, what I said. There's an entire theory that says the minority stress model and theory suggests that if you are a minority, then you are less healthy. The very, very famous example is that racism is likely what's causing heart disease in Black people. Go figure. When you are put under chronic stress because of something you cannot control, like your race or your gender, you will have differing health impacts, and you're less likely to your overall health is likely to be lower, which is what I marked here. Oh, and it's gone. Yes, so women are more likely to experience chronic pain, but then also because of the way gender works, men are less likely, we would imagine, because of gender roles of like stoicism, men are less likely to report their pain anyway. They're less likely to complain about their pain, even though they are experiencing it and they should be reaching out for help, and they're not. Which then leads to an empathy gap. Right? So a whole bunch of men are so knowing this, we'd be like, it makes a lot of sense that of course men are going to be more judgmental because they are trained from the time they're born to suck it up, even though they should not. They should reach out for help when they're in pain, and therefore they're gonna be more judgmental of somebody, especially like Jools Lebron, who is a trans woman, but that's a complicated thing that is slightly outside the scope, and something that somebody who is turning into a pumpkin should not discuss. If they are cisgendered, particularly. Sex/gender may be a proxy for individual differences in biological factors that contribute to chronic pain, including hormonal changes and genetic differences. And that's also the hard thing, too, is that, like, when you, one of the huge differences, there's a huge difference in the number of women who have, or maybe not huge, but an appreciable difference between the number of women who have Alzheimer's and dementia as to men. And there is a really cool, and I might link it in the eventual video that comes out of this, but there's this really cool, I think it was a Radio Lab that I listened to, talking about how bikini medicine. And that was the doctor being interviewed about this, was discussing the idea that the only thing that makes men and women different are things that are covered by bikinis. Bikini medicine meant that people were like, oh yeah, well, women live longer. They live like 1 year longer than men. That's not an example. Not example. That is not an explanation for why more women have particularly early onset dementia, although I think it's general onset. It's general dementia. So what she has found is that when you experience your cycle, if you have one, you are more likely that's like a reset of your brain. And so when that cycle stops, when you enter menopause, that cycle stops. That means that the thing that your brain had been doing for the majority of your life, if you have a cycle, right, just quits. And so it, like, that rebooting that it was doing stops, and that, like, the things that it was fixing in that reboot process, or catching, rather, I think it's more like catching, the errors and the problems that the reboot was catching are no longer being caught. And so that is a potential reason for why women are more likely. Thank you. At one point, my tangent was interesting. But yes, so this is another example of a tangent. But anyway, yes, so there are more than just bikini medicine differences between men and women, but because endocrinology is also massive, especially neuroendocrinology, like, massively, we don't know anything about the brain. We also don't know anything about hormones. We just kind of know that they work and that they exist, right? And I say that, but we do know a lot. And it's getting better every day, but, like, we have to consider that we don't know what we don't know, and the bikini medicine thing is a double-edged sword, because on one side you don't want women to be in the deficit model of health, where, like, everything that's different about women is bad, and that's why. No, everything is genuinely different, but, like, our brains probably mostly kind of work the same ways, and except in very specific instances where it doesn't. For example, having a complete neurological reset because your cycle shifts. Yeah, it's just, it's complicated, and this is why we have subject area experts talk about it, and why I'm not doing science education. I'm working really hard to help you understand why you should not be judgmental of people like Jools Lebron, or anybody reaching out because they're in chronic pain, and reaching out for help, because they should be doing that. That's what you should be doing when you have chronic pain. In contrast, and then, yeah, like, so there is this is a lot of kind of the summary of the individual differences section is that we don't know what we don't know. Especially because there's a practice of excluding females in preclinical research because of the cycle. Because your where you are in your cycle does depend on, does change things. People simplify their study by including only people who don't have that cycle, which means just mostly because there are very few transgender people in this world, and they're and not all of them are even pursuing a medical transition. Like, yeah, that just means cisgender men. Which is not good. That's bikini medicine. Exactly right there. That is, in fact, bikini medicine. But yes, so the influence of these... age. So this is what I was talking about earlier. General chronic pain prevalence also increases with age, but plateaus at midlife. So if you have your chronic illness, like your disability that leads to chronic pain, you're gonna have it at midlife, and then it's just gonna continue to the end of your days. This is why, like, even if you don't have problems with alcohol, like, you should still, like, not drink a lot, because the liver cirrhosis is gonna follow you even if the alcoholism doesn't. So like treat your body as nice as you can. Be kind to yourself. Eat as much as you can. It's also shouldn't be your job. You should have an easier time of it than we currently have, but yes. Um but a prevalence of types of chronic pain, including headaches, abdominal, back, and chest pain, increases with age. People live and declining later in life, which was an interesting thing I didn't know before this. Additionally, cognitive and affective responses to pain change with age, such as higher pain acceptance and self-efficacy and lower catastrophizing. So, like, again, this is one of the reasons why people are annoyed when they hang out with middle schoolers, because they're just like so dramatic. But they literally have no life experience to tell them otherwise. They literally don't. They don't have they've never experienced heartbreak, so they don't know that it's going to be fine. They've never, they don't really understand that when they look back in 20 years, they're gonna be like, oh wow, that was not a big deal, actually, because I was a kid. The whole I was a kid explanation, like, personally, part of my I was a kid explanation was gained through working in a middle school and being like, oh wow, no, I'm so different from these children. They're still, children are still responsible for their actions, and there's a reason we, like, hold on to them for a while, but at some point you do need to forgive yourself for, like, if you're like me and struggle to forgive yourself for being mean to people. Like, oh well, no, I was a kid. They were a kid too. We were all making poor choices. In the book series that shall not be named, one of the things that I gained from it as a child was the idea that no one likes themselves when they were 15. And that's, like, a line that two characters say to a 15-year-old. And, like, that's not necessarily true. I'm kind of proud of myself where I was as a 15-year-old. But, like, it was a very, like, to hear that was a very helpful thing at 15 to be like, or, well, I was a little bit younger than 15, but, like, it was a helpful thing to hear and understand and, like, embrace. So, like, I didn't have to be perfect now because I'm going to be better in the future. But if you don't have somebody to tell you that, you might catastrophize and be like, well, obviously, I'm making all these poor decisions now. I'm always going to be making these poor choices. I'm never going to get better. I'm just stupid. I'm going to be stupid forever. And it's like, no, baby, you're a child. You're going to get better at this as life goes on. But yeah, and so as it relates to pain, it's like, well, if you've experienced pain, and you've been managing, especially if you've been managing your chronic pain for a long time, you're going to have some more self-acceptance, and you're also going to, self-efficacy is like how efficacy, I think of effective, like you are effective at influencing your own life. So an example of self-efficacy is voting. So somebody who has low self-efficacy is less likely to vote because they don't think, oh, my choice doesn't matter. But your choice does matter. Please vote, because you, especially in local elections, these things, so my school district is going to, over the course of 2 years, lose a quarter of their staff. And the levy that would have prevented a little bit of these losses. We've already lost some, but that would have prevented the full, like, quarter staff loss. Didn't pass by 500 votes in my town of, between 10 and 20,000 people. 500 votes is like, one person is 100 people making having 5 conversations with people and helping them make a choice to prevent the school district from losing a quarter of their staff in 2 years, which just simply will disrupt children's education. It just simply will. And it will negatively impact children's education. It just simply will. Because, like, they just don't have library techs anymore, so no one is shelving books. so kids can't check out the books because there aren't any library. And, and so, like, anyway, that's getting down the line. But, like, can you see how, like, somebody who understands themselves to be able to influence the world around them is going to vote, because they're going to be like, oh yeah, I know that, like, voting matters, it's important, and I want to change, I want to be a positive change in my community, versus, like, somebody who doesn't vote and because they think they don't matter. But yeah, so yes. So again, as you get older, you understand that your influence on your life is a lot stronger. Also, not for nothing, the wealthiest group of people by age are the elderly, because of just how the neoliberalism has shook out for the last 50 years, or nearly 50 years. It's been since the 80s, right? But yeah, that they are the wealthiest people. They have their wealth is trapped with them, and so of course they're going to be self-efficacious because they have money. That's one of the major differences between being a child and an adult, right? Is that you have money, you have your own money, so you don't have to ask permission to buy candy. Another, like, yeah, like, when you have money, that another example of self-efficacy. But then, yeah, so for the purposes of our conversation, when you are older, you are better at accepting things, you understand that you can influence your own life, and you're less likely to catastrophize because you know that it's not a catastrophe. You've done this all before. Yeah, and this is saying, like, generally, older adults are more positive and they have improved emotional regulation. I would again suggest that they are wealthier, and both of these things are associated with wealth as well. And then even in the ones that aren't wealthy, because obviously, like, I know impoverished elderly people, but even the ones that aren't wealthy have social benefits. So that's like they have Social Security and Medicare. There's a reason we're trying to get Medicare for everyone. It's because, like, having Medicare to fall back on is truly, and like I am a Medicaid recipient. For now, I'm a Medicaid recipient, and truly, I had no idea the benefit and the wonderful, like, I'm so glad to have lived in Oregon, because I simply, there's no way, like, in another state, I couldn't make the life decisions I've made. But yes, and in this case, and back to the paper, like, we need to do more research. Here is the thing that I wanted to talk about. We're finally, hour 2, after hour 3 actually, we're entering hour 3, we're finally getting to the thing that I really did want to talk about, which is affective factors. So, if you are depressed, chronic pain is associated with negative emotional experiences like depression and anxiety. You are more likely to struggle to make an emotionally difficult decision. Like whether or not you should make a GoFundMe for your teeth. Swiftly on. Chronic pain influences social interactions and constrains social relationships, especially when pain experienced is severe. You don't want to leave your house because you're in so much pain. You can't drive because you're in so much pain, so you can't leave your house because you're in so much pain. Chronic pain, in particular, is associated with reduced social participation, increased loneliness and isolation, and lower relationship quality. And anyone who has ever been isolated, which is, say it with me, all of us, we all experienced COVID, knows how crazy being isolated can drive you. And I say this as somebody whose mental health predilections are very clearly tied to my social isolation. Something that I have just been able to track my whole life. And so when I say crazy, I'm using it in the reclaiming the craziness term. Intrusive thoughts are wild, y'all. Don't recommend. On the other hand, social connectedness and support are crucial buffers for pain-related stress and symptom burden. What did I tell you? What did I tell you? Jools Lebron is supposed to reach out for help when she's in pain. We're all supposed to reach out when we're in pain. Will you make maybe weird decisions about how you reach out for help when you're in pain? Yes. That doesn't mean we should judge you for it, because it is entirely predictable. It is not acceptable to dogpile someone who is experiencing chronic pain and is really cut up about it and is actually seeking social support, because actually that's what you're supposed to do. Because that is how you enhance your pain coping. The joint effect of chronic pain on cognition and emotion can impair social functioning. Specifically, chronic pain may alter perceptions of others as a result in social cognitive impairments, such as difficulty understanding mental states and the emotions of others. So if you're in chronic pain, and you can reach out to help, and your 1 million followers some of them will want to help you, are you going to think, well, many of my 1 million followers are really struggling to afford gas right now? Apparently not. And this is entirely predictable. And now that you know, maybe you're not going to be as much of a dogpiler next time. Media literacy is very much tied to knowing these things, my friends. It's very important to know, to understand the world, not just takes on the internet. That is part of what media literacy is. And just reduced empathy. Emotion processing, which is important for understanding and engaging others, is also impaired with chronic pain. You aren't processing your emotions because you can't, because you're in pain. So, of course, it's going to be worse, and you're going to need to reach out for more help. Processing your emotions with other people, talking to your friends about your problems, is a huge, huge step. And it's one of the reasons why, again, men who are less likely to reach out for help when they're to process their emotions, because they're in a prison of their own making, but like not their own making. Sometimes they've been told actively that they shouldn't reach out for help. Those are bad people. Don't hang out with them. There are going to be many people in your life that want to help you process your emotions. Do not let the crazy people, the selfish people, the maybe chronic pain havers. So you don't even have to blame them. They just have chronic pain. They can't help you process your emotions. Don't let them get in the way of talking to people about your feelings, because you do need to talk about people, because then it helps you be more empathetic towards, again, the emotionally drained person with chronic pain. Maybe they can help you be like, my friend. Be kind to them. They literally aren't they're in a bad place. They're in a bad place. They can't make good choices. And that means they can't help you with your choices either. You know, it all connects. It all connects. And this has been observed in people with not what I was describing, because obviously, so for one, women are more likely to have and be diagnosed with fibromyalgia. That was a very specific wording that I would like to incorporate more into my speaking, because also I know a transmasculine person with fibromyalgia, but women are more likely to be diagnosed with fibromyalgia. And so it's like, yes, this is all complicated soup of why it's hard to be a human being. Like I said, the smooth brain of a fish makes life a lot more simple, but a lot less rewarding. So I would say, as a keeper of fish, I'm happy to have the folds in the brain. Although there has been work on how those with chronic pain navigate emotionally charged and non-social decisions, little work to date has investigated the impact of chronic pain on social decision making. But as I've, hopefully been talking about this whole time, Jools Lebron is a case study in that chronic pain and decision making. knowing that there needs to be more research, I would suggest is another thing that we can keep in mind as consumers of media, that just because we've read something or listened to me talk for going on 3 hours doesn't mean that we should consider ourselves experts, or that we should we should be open to things. We do know the general trends though, and we should be kinder. We should have been kinder to Jools Lebron. Yeah, and so this is them inside baseball talking about what researchers can do to get better information about this. Altered or impaired decision-making in this domain may have real-world consequences for people with chronic pain, contributing to social isolation and reducing pro-social behaviors, which, when you have fewer pro-social behaviors, less people want to be around you, so this is, again, self-reinforcing. Behavioral responses and social exchanges observed in laboratory, and people with chronic pain can relate to their perceptions of others, including higher perceived rejection. So actually, not only is it bad that we were mean to Jools Lebron for no reason, we dogpiled her for, a poor decision that she was going to make, she's in pain, she is experiencing she's perceiving the rejection, even though obviously as harder. So I haven't buried the lead, because I don't really know what happened, but apparently she posted about of her in a wheelchair, which wouldn't, honestly, if she's in that much pain, perceived rejection, hostility, and injustice, even so, I have made an argument that she is being treated unjustly. So objectively, I would say she is being treated unjustly. Based on this research, she's going to perceive that as more than what even I'm suggesting she deserves. As an objective statement of reality. And that again, that's really sad. That it would explain what we're seeing from her, and it's not fair to her to jump up and down on her back. Oh, and then this is again, moving wider scope. I had a friend who was chronically ill as a kid, as a teenager, who just truly every time she interacted with the medical profession, she was screwed over. And from somebody just truly refusing to give her not sonogram, an ultrasound that would have diagnosed her with the thing that was very dangerous that was happening to her because of her age. You're not paying for the test. Just run the test. So there's a real reason for that people do distrust medical professionals. They sometimes are bad at their jobs, and sometimes they specifically target people. For example, black women, like Jools Lebron, saying that they can't, there's that's the oft repeated that they're teaching doctors to ignore the pain of black women still, and the endorsement, and then even though they've stopped doing that, in 2020, the majority of doctors that exist in the world were educated before 2020, so they're continuing to make those poor choices with regard to the pain of black women. So there are systemic factors that make people distrust doctors, yes. And then there is the pain and the altered perceptions that one has as somebody who is in pain that make you less, likely to to reach out and try new things, which includes meeting new people, trusting new people. I wouldn't, there's a degree to which is paranoia. I wouldn't call it that. I would call it distrust of others, an increased perception of injustice. And when it's a medical professional and they haven't done anything wrong, that's bad. When it's, again, not to bring it back to a place of vaccine hesitancy, but to bring it back to a place of vaccine hesitancy, it's kind of it's in my opinion, faulty logic to say because people experience medical neglect and bad doctors, they should be justified in their vaccine hesitancy. And to a certain extent, maybe they're justified in the hesitancy. They're not justified in their reinforcement of ignorance. No one is justified in reinforcing their own ignorance. But people who distrust others and have an increased perception of injustice, they think they are. And there is an objective world out there that suggests that you need to get vaccinated, because if you don't get vaccinated, we don't have herd immunity, and then the point of the vaccine is moot. So we do need to, in fact, engage with people and say, like, so yeah, you have a real reason for that is a thing that did happen, but it didn't happen to you. So you should probably get that vaccine. You should probably think about and, like, onboard the fact that this is different from that, and you can think critically here. We should be able to have these it's not even high expectations. It's just, like, truly, to my mind, it's participating in society. And I don't think it's unfair of me to ask people to look past historic injustice to the evidence of our eyes and say, hey, maybe we shouldn't use that historic injustice as a justification for vaccine hesitancy. If you are somebody who especially since if you have the opportunity to learn the difference between what happened in the past and what's happening now. Because there is a difference, and just because you have a reason doesn't mean that it's a justifiable reason, I guess, is what I am saying. Taken together, it is critical to consider the role of individual factors when evaluating the impact of chronic pain on decision-making in the future. Identifying and characterizing the role of moderating factors, moderating mean making things worse or harder, in this case, or easier. And pain-related decisions will guide future research and approaches to managing chronic pain and its emotional and cognitive and social consequences. Yeah, so theoretical implications are not important to us because we're not doing science education, we're doing media literacy. Clinical implications are kind of important, but let's just read conclusions because... yeah. In conclusion, the synthesis melding of information of current evidence indicates that chronic pain alters decision-making via multiple paths, including reduced decision-making performance, you're bad at making decisions, increased risk-taking and delayed discounting, so you are more likely to take a risk, and you are less likely to wait to have enough information to make a good decision, as an example, not as a definition of what I was just reading, just to be clear here. 3, an altered outcome sensitivity, and 4, reduced learning and cognitive flexibility. Work to date also demonstrates parallel changes to the brain and moderating role in brain, which again, duh, it all happens in the brain. Everything is happening in the brain. Sorry. And the moderating role of individual factors through the current and investigation on factors such as age are limited. More investigation is needed to understand the extent to which decision-making impairments are evident within and across specific chronic pain conditions to parse out the potential exacerbating factors. Essentially, more research is necessary, which is true of every single study that has ever been written. But it is particularly true in this case because there have been very, very limited, as I recall, there wasn't even 30 studies in this review, and that's, 18. So there wasn't even 20 reviews in this, papers that this study could review, which is one of the reasons why, again, they did a narrative review, which is a particular type of review, instead of doing like a meta-analysis, which would be a more mathy review. They have chosen to synthesize, explain, bring together all the results, see the patterns and all that sort of stuff as a review instead of doing mathy reviews, because there isn't enough math to be done. Isn't it lovely to be at 10 o'clock at night and talking on the internet about something that is outside your area of expertise, but still within your ability to help people understand? But yeah, I never asked for questions. Sorry, my bad. If you have any questions, feel free to ask them in the comment section at any time. Like I said, I will see them. I simply will. I, love receiving comments. I don't receive very many of them, so it will be seen. So I will answer it to my best of my ability because I'm Kate, and I like to explain things, even when it's for 2.5 hours. Thank you to the authors of the study for doing this. You all can find this study. Sorry, it's motion sickness warning. Sorry, my bad. I need to stop fidgeting. You can find the study on the internet. It's in the Journal of Pain 35. It was published last year. If you have any questions about that, I can hope to answer them. In general, be nice to people who are in chronic pain. They are going to make weird choices, made weirder because they are struggling to understand. They're struggling socially, and they need more help than they can give. And therefore, you might think it's unfair that you might have to give more right now, but they genuinely can't make the quality of decision that you are able to make right now. So it's not fair to hold a person with chronic pain to your standard of decision making, because if you're not in chronic pain, then you don't. And even if you are in chronic pain, you might have a different chronic pain that means that you are better at certain types of decisions than somebody who does. Like, and then I want to be clear, though, of course, and at all times we are responsible for our actions. It's just like the consequences of those actions should probably be commensurate. I'm getting to the point where I'm tired enough that I'm doing like $5 words instead of like normal human words, so I better get going. Thanks for being here today, and being here in the future if you ever do watch this in the future. We are